Good afternoon, and welcome to Southern College of Optometry's June webinar on COVID-19 and its effects on the application cycle. Thank you for sharing your time today to learn more about this year's application process, and I hope that all of you are staying safe and healthy. My name is Ashley Cates, and I am the Student Services and Admissions Officer at Southern College of Optometry. I'm one of the admissions team members who answers your admissions inquiries, arranges campus tours, and participates in the admission interview process. Joining me today is Mr. Mike Robertson, the Director of Admissions and Enrollment Services. He has over 20 years of experience at admissions, and he knows all there is to know in regards to the admissions process. He is very involved in the decision-making of who receives invitations to interview and is present for all interviews. Needless to say, Mr. Robertson is extremely knowledgeable about admissions and will be able to offer a wealth of good information in today's session. So I am very appreciative Mr. Robertson is going the extra mile to join us today to provide his invaluable insights. Today, we want to make this session as helpful as possible for you. We encourage you to ask questions as you think of them and post them in the question box that you think you're right. We may address them while in progress of the session or save them until the end, but rest be assured we will be sure to address your inquiries. Furthermore, please be aware that the webinar is being recorded, and once it's downloaded, we will make it available for you to view again via YouTube. So we know that many of you are planning on applying to optometry school during this cycle, and it's been greatly impacted by COVID-19. The purpose of the webinar is to assist you in getting better prepared to be a strong and competitive applicant. We know that you have many concerns regarding the admissions process and timeline. So today we would like to offer you tips and strategies for navigating the admissions process during this unprecedented and challenging time. So without further ado, I would like to turn the session over to Mr. Robertson.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have to thank, I don't know if I should thank Ashley or Ashley, because she said I knew everything about the admissions process. So you're going to find out soon whether that's true or not. But we did want to start off with some common questions that we've gotten lots of emails about and inquiries. And I'm very tempted to say the answer to all of these questions is we don't know, but that's not really the truth. The first thing I want to hit is just the pass-fail issue, and we do accept pass-fail for courses that were this spring, this summer. We are now considering what to do for the fall. We're trying to see how many schools are going to be online and how many are going to be in the classroom. So we'll let you know with that. As regarding the OAT, we do know that they're keeping the testing centers at, I think, 50% capacity. So that means a lot of tests are being delayed. So we understand that. And quite frankly, we don't know exactly how that's going to play out. In the past, we often had a number of seats already offered by September 15th. And this year, we don't know if we'll have any offered. We don't know if we're going to have on-campus interviews or we're going to have to revert to something like a Skype interview. We've created a virtual tour for you if you can't come to campus. So there are many, many questions, as you can imagine. But do know that we accept pass-fail. We accept online coursework. We do ask that you try to take the labs in person, if at all possible, but we will accept them online. As far as the shadowing, a lot of people are asking, well, how am I going to get that done? Well, that's going to be a step-by-step process. And frankly, I hope you've already done some shadowing. I think it's very difficult to decide on a healthcare profession without doing some shadowing. It's kind of like jumping into the dark and not knowing what's there. But we always recommend 30 to 45 hours over 2 or 3 settings. If you don't have that, by the time your application is submitted, we'll come up with the standard answer for you. Obviously, we're going to be much more flexible Does that mean that those who have, say, 100 hours right now set in at least 2 or 3 offices, are they going to have a heads up? They may have a heads up. We're going to follow the pattern we've always done, which is inviting the most qualified candidates for an interview in the order that their files are completed. So if you can't shadow, this is a perfect time to do some internet exploration of various websites. For example, the American Optometric Association has tons of information. The state in which you live should have a lot of information on their state optometric association, as well as the state optometry board. Now, the board is often going to be legalistic information of what's required to become a participant. So you have to kind of use your judgment. You can also interview optometrists at this time. If you know an office is closed, but you know it, or it's your optometrist, come up with some questions that you'd like to ask of, what would you recommend that a candidate consider when he or she is applying to optometry schools? Or what do you wish you had done that you didn't do? What is your daily life like? How many people do you see normally as a doctor? Are you in a private practice? Are you in a group practice? So you can come up with lots of things to fill your knowledge, because let's just play devil's advocate and say that we don't get a lot of optometry offices open before next winter. Well, I'm sure at that point we're going to reconsider that 30 to 45 hours of in-office shadowing. So, but we still expect you to learn and know about the profession that you're going into. So keep that in mind. Do as much as you can and participate as much as possible. Okay, so now we're going to go into a little bit about, review the application process and what that includes. So this is, again, the order of things the way they used to be. The first and most important thing with the OAT is we want you to understand you do not have to complete the OAT in order to apply. We will not interview without an OAT score, but there's no reason to not apply as early as possible beginning on June 30th. You don't have to complete your file on June 30th. You just need to get the ball rolling in July and August. You don't want to wait too long because things can snowball very quickly. So try to get an OAT date scheduled and then start your OptomCAS application in July or August. Please note this: you do not have to have the 2 letters of reference on file in order for OptomCAS to verify/audit your file. And it's that process that determines if schools or colleges can invite you for an interview. So in other words, you may have filled out all the transcript information. You may have had your essay completed. You may have your shadowing hours logged in, but until you have all transcripts on file, OptomCAS is not going to audit your file / verify it. So make sure you order a transcript from every single college where you've taken a course. Pay attention to what I just said. Every single college where you've taken a course. If you took one course at a community college, we must have that transcript directly from that college. If you took dual enrollment credit, we need the transcript from the college where that credit was recorded. You can't just say, oh, it's all on my 4-year transcript or my degree granting transcript, because that's not necessarily the case. So you make sure you list every school where you've taken a course and then have a transcript sent from the registrar's office to OptomCAS, and that has to be done electronically. No more paper. Well, I shouldn't say no more paper because they will accept paper, but get it done as soon as possible. As far as the letters of reference, that can be no more paper. It has to be done electronically when you sign up, and begin filling out your OptomCAS application, there will be spaces for you to list an optometrist and a faculty advisor. At least for us, we have at least 2 we require, and those people will be contacted. So the best thing to do now is to contact your advisor or your physics professor, whoever's going to provide that academic letter for you, and say, look, I need your contact information, and I need you to be on the lookout for an email from OptomCAS requesting a letter of reference. Again, they will not hold up your file from being verified, but most schools want to see at least 1 letter before they're going to consider you for an application. I also can't emphasize enough, there's a big section called experiences, and in that section is where you list just what you see on your screen: employment, shadowing, extracurricular involvement, leadership, etc. Do not leave this blank. We look at a whole candidate, and if you leave it blank except for the shadowing, then we make an assumption that you've never worked and you were never involved in extracurricular activities, and therefore you're probably not as well-rounded as the next candidate. So be sure to fill those out. We do not want to know what you did in high school. Sorry, you may have been doing everything, but we need to know what you've done in college. On the shadowing, you do not have to keep a chart necessarily, although I think it's good for your own benefit, but you can summarize and say, shadowed 20 hours between July 1, 2016 and June 30th, 2018, was able to sit in with patients. Just give a paragraph or so of what you were able to do. And for us, the optometry letter must be from somebody with whom you've worked or shadowed. A lot of times candidates say, does shadowing and work count the same? It pretty much does. Now, we're not, ignorant to the fact that if you work, you're probably doing more hands-on, but that's not always the case. Some offices will get you to work in the office at the business part of it and never let you in to see patients. And that's something you've got to do. You've got to get in and see the patient-doctor interaction. Now, there's the big, well, I guess I shouldn't jump to the interview, but submit your supplemental application and fee to us. You applying to OptomCAS does not make you an official applicant of Southern College of Optometry. You have to apply to both, to OptomCAS and to SCO. We have a link that will open up on June 30th on our website showing you where to submit your application and $50 fee. That makes you an official applicant. Once we get that, we review it and contact you. And we may say, hey, we got your application. We're waiting on your OAT scores. Or we may say, hey, we have everything that we need for you at this point, and we will be in touch soon regarding a possible interview. But segueing into interviews, we do not know yet whether those will be on campus or Skyped. My instinct is telling me to say they're going to be Skyped, but I just don't know. So you kind of have to, this kind of really brings up the point of staying in communication. You have to communicate with us. You have to send us emails or calls and say, have you made any progress on your decisions? That kind of thing. As I tease all the time, don't call me every day and ask me the weather in Memphis, because I can tell you what month it is, whether it's hot or less hot. So what I need is you asking questions that are going to affect your application process. Your OAT was delayed, etc. So stay in touch with us. And again, we will stay in touch with you. So that kind of leads into what makes a competitive applicant. And we list first taking the OAT early, but I really think we should probably say apply as soon as possible. And the reason that becomes so important, especially with this pandemic, is I think a lot of candidates get it in their head, okay, their file is finished on Monday. On Tuesday, I invite you for an interview on that next Friday, 3 days away, and that's not how it works. We tend to book interviews weeks in advance. So we may have a file that's finished and the candidate looks great, and we send them a note on August 20th to come for an interview, but the only dates we have at that point are September 20th and forward. So you can see that as time goes on, so maybe on October 1, all we have are dates available in November. Well, before you know it, you've gotten to the winter holidays. So you just have to take care of business. There's no other way around it. We have many candidates we interviewed in March this year, February and March, who we were unable to offer a seat because we already had a full class. Now, we eventually created an alternate list, and some of those candidates were admitted. But the longer you take, the longer it's going to be in getting in here for an interview. When we say become familiar with the profession, again, that shadowing plus the internet research, the interviews you do with professionals, etc. When we say demonstrate a commitment to service, we award a number of scholarships every year. And I can tell you right now that let's just say we have a 3.8, 380, and 2 of them competing for a top scholarship of $15,000 a year. The one who has more service more than likely is going to get that scholarship. Now, that doesn't mean the other one won't get any money, just he or she may get less money. So, and when we say service, we don't necessarily mean just service to optometry. We mean service to humankind. We mean service to each other. We mean volunteering for nonprofits. It can be an animal shelter. It can be Habitat for Humanity. It can be a food bank. It does not have to necessarily be an optometric experience. We just want you to get used to that, because when you come to SCO, you will have to complete a certain number of hours of service or you do not graduate. And part of that is just because we believe in that. And another part of that is because you have to get in that mode. If you're going to run a practice at some point and you live in a community, and not some huge city, but even a big city, you're going to have to be involved in your community. You're going to get people to come to your practice because they saw you speak at the Lions Club, or they saw your picture in the local paper where you donated money to the food bank. It's a win-win situation. You're helping your fellow brothers and sisters, you're helping yourself to become a better person, and you're having more interactions with people. You're going to learn that the more you can interact with people, the better a clinician you're going to be. And the same thing goes for the asking the questions. Again, you don't need to ask me about the weather in Memphis, but you do need to ask me what's our current policy on pass-fail courses, or have we started allowing students to be admitted with the GRE. We accept the GRE, but our policy has really always been GRE is secondary, OAT is prime. And really the GRE we only recommend when it comes time that you're running late, or you switched and all of a sudden decided to go from business to optometry in January. We might recommend a GRE. So you need to keep up with all those questions so that you don't fall behind. Okay, the timeline. June 30th and closing on March 1st. Again, cannot make it any more clear. If you wait until March 1st, you've basically just wasted your time. Very few people who apply that late are going to get an interview. It tells us many things. First of all, what have you been doing since June? Or were you applying to another health profession and were rejected by that health profession, and now you think you're going to get optometry on the rebound? That doesn't look very well. We understand that people are often interested in multiple health professions, and shadowing helps to determine which one. But you have to make a commitment to optometry in order to be considered for it. And for many people, just applying on the last day shows to us they were not very dedicated. So keep that in mind when you're applying. And again, even if you haven't finished prerequisites, we'll say that again, even if you haven't finished prerequisites, you can apply. The majority of the students we accept are lacking at least one prerequisite when we accept them. They just simply have to complete them before school starts. Keep in mind though, if you're missing physics or organic or a biology course, it's very difficult to take the OAT until you've had those prerequisites. So even though you could attempt the OAT at that point, it is difficult to complete that test without those courses. So again, and I know y'all are probably going, why is he repeating this? Because no matter how many times I repeat it every year, there are people who miss out on a seat or on scholarship money. Scholarship money leaves our hands in January usually, maybe December, and we give more endowed scholarships than any optometry school in the country. So we have money to award, but if you come lollygagging along in January and you have a 4.0 and a 350, you may not get any money. So if nothing else inspires you to apply early, I hope that the money will help you be inspired. We are going to start this process as we've indicated. June 30th, we may have a lot of I don't know answers, but we will launch on that day. For now, we will accept an unofficial, or OptomCAS will accept an unofficial transcript, but by the time OptomCAS opens, that may have changed. The reason that is in there is there are certain schools mainly in the Northeast who had to literally shut everything down because of the pandemic, and they could not release transcripts. The vast majority of schools are now able to release them. So if you try to submit an unofficial one, you will be questioned in the software as to why. And we also know the schools, or the majority of schools, who are not issuing them. So even though we're accepting them now, we may not accept them later on in the process. Your application will now include your general essay. And the essay is really just a personal statement about why you're interested in this profession, what got you interested, what are your future plans, etc. This year, we're adding, all schools and colleges are adding information or a question where you can tell us how the pandemic has affected you personally, not just as an applicant, but as a human being. But as far as an applicant, we're going to want to know, were you able to shadow more? Were you not able to shadow more? Were you able to pick up? Was your OAT canceled? All the schools want to know, because this is really a great way for us to gather information and make more decisions. So it's not very long. There's nothing to panic about. Just you will have a few extra questions during the process. So be prepared to answer some more. There are a couple of links we're providing you that show you where you can find out more information. One is just applying, and you see OptomCAS.org, and then the other one is pre-optometry information, and that's through the AOSA, which is the American Optometric Student Association. They have lots of information. You can also Google the Association of Schools and Colleges of Optometry. That's ASCO for short. I believe their website is opted.org, opteducation.org, opted.org. Or again, just Google the Association of Schools and Colleges of Optometry. So go to those sites, learn what you can. We want to show you.
Mr. Robertson, before we
Yes.
go on, there was a question.
Okay.
So can applicants start sending in their transcripts now, or do they need to wait until June 30th to have them sent for the new cycle?
Very good question. You don't need to send anything now. It will be shredded. Wait until you've initiated an application and then you have an ID number. I know one candidate last year who lost money because he applied, but he sent his transcripts. He was trying to finish things early. I can't remember why, but he needed to finish early. He sent transcripts before he applied, thinking that they would hold them. And when I wrote him to say, hey, I need your transcripts to be submitted to OptomCAS, he thought they had already been there. Well, at that point, he has to reorder 3 transcripts, I believe, and they all have to be on file before OptomCAS will verify. So do not send a transcript until you have created your file and have an ID number. So very good question. On your screen is showing you what a profile of our current class looks like. And I could tell you horror stories about how hard it's been to get 136 because we've had 134 for it seems like quite a while trying to get the last 2 candidates. But as of this minute, we do have 136. You can see we had about 800 who applied. The GPA and the OAT are very important numbers, but I like to clarify them. Some candidates will see 3.65 or 336 and say, I don't have those numbers, I'm not going to get in. And that's very, very far from the truth. Those are the means. So you know as well as I do that a mean means there's some below it and some above it. So some candidates walk on water. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not unusual anymore to get 4.0s with 380s and 390s and even a 400. But those are at one end of the bell-shaped curve. Then you get candidates who are 2.35 and 270 who do not have a chance to be admitted here whatsoever, but they go ahead and apply. But the majority of people are in the middle of the bell-shaped curve, or as I like to call it, the middle of the blob. And so that means that a lot of candidates are 3.2, 310, 3.2, 320, 2.95, 330, etc. The things that are important, or really the thing that is important, is the number 3. I'm going to be honest. We really like to see a GPA above 3.0, and we just about have to see an OAT of 300 and above. It is very important that you stay on top of your studies and you perform well on the test. And when I say above a 3.0, that doesn't mean you cannot be admitted with below a 3.0. But if you are, the chances are we're going to look for a higher OAT. In other words, let's say you have a 2.95. We're probably going to look for a 330 or higher on the OAT. And the reverse also applies. Let's say you have a 300 on the OAT. We're going to look for a 3.6 or higher on your GPA. Now, there are rules that never get followed like that. I don't want anybody to think, okay, you have a 2.99 and a 300, and that means you can't get admitted. Not necessarily. Is it harder? Without a doubt, it's harder. When you apply, and if you've taken the OAT, I'm going to respond and tell you whether or not I think you need to retake the test. A lot of candidates get a little antsy when I do that, but I'm telling you based on years of experience, and I'm also telling you because if it's in July, August, September, October, even into November, you've got plenty of time to do that. So don't think if you apply and you were so fired up for the process and you took the OAT and a 290 came out, do not think that you are rejected. You send me that score and I'm just going to tell you you need to take it again. It's that simple, and we'll wait on those second scores. So sometimes candidates get nervous that their first OAT attempt has to be the only one. No, I can tell you though that probably I think the numbers are 60 to 70% take it once, about 20% take the test twice, and about 5% take it 3 times. That's for our entering classes. So you can see a lot of people are retaking that test. Obtaining a degree or not, you know, technically, I don't know if any school requires a bachelor's degree. Maybe one school does. But most schools want you to have a degree. So our entering classes for the last many years have been 100%, 98%, 99% with a bachelor's degree. And that just means a degree before you begin classes in late August. So, and some have masters. There have been a couple of classes with, well, really only one class I can think of here that had a PhD in it. We have had more PhDs apply. So you want to be able to compete with those candidates. If you say, you know what, I'm going to try to get in at the end of my junior year as opposed to when I graduate. So that means you would have to apply at the end of your sophomore year and then finish your junior year and start. Technically, you could do that. We tell those candidates to make sure their GPA and their OAT are above those means. If you're applying without a degree, we're going to generally look for a 365 or 330 and higher. Have people been admitted without a degree with lower numbers than that? Of course they have, but few and far between. So if you're playing the odds, if you're a gambling person, gamble that we want to see as high of a score as possible for the OAT.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Is the mean overall GPA just for science courses or the cumulative GPA?
Good question. That's the cumulative, and we look at cumulative more than anything. We certainly have a prerequisite GPA, and quite frankly, you would be amazed at how many GPAs OptomCAS creates for us. We had to narrow it down. At one point, I think we had 30 some odd GPAs that were calculated. I think we're down to a nice 15 or 20 now. But we get your freshman GPA, sophomore GPA, your freshman science GPA, your sophomore science GPA, your non-science GPA. We are certainly going to pay attention to the science GPA, but I think really we pay more attention to how you progressed as a student. And did your grades go up or did they go down as you got into the tougher courses? Did you take good loads? Were you taking 16, 17, 18 hours a term? It's really important that you try to enroll in as many courses and perform well in as many courses. But to say that the prerequisite GPA is more important, I'm not going to say that. It's pretty important, but it's not more. Okay, we're going to move ahead a little bit about the GPA and what to do. If you have a course that you think you need to repeat, trust me, I get that question a lot. And that last question you see where it says, did you learn the material? How did you perform on that section of the OAT? That's really your own answer. A lot of times candidates will tell me, I made a C. Should I retake it? I made a C minus. Well, sometimes a C and a C minus is not that bad. Especially, let's say it was organic and then you made 340 in the organic section of the OAT. No, I'm not going to suggest that you repeat it. Let's say you made a 270 in the organic section. Yes, we're going to tell you it would be a good idea to repeat it. I'm going to let a little secret out here where it says you must pass the class. We are a school that does not require a C minus or above in all our prerequisites. Now, if you have more than one D in a prerequisite, it's going to be difficult to be admitted to begin with. So it's not like you can make all Ds and get in. We just have never had that hard and FAST rule of C and above for prerequisites. So let's say you get in biochem. Lots of people hate biochem, and you make a D plus even. We will accept that. Biochem is not on the OAT. If you're a mediocre applicant, we may suggest that you retake it. So it really just depends. Do you feel like you learned the material? Did you perform well on the OAT in that section? That really gives us an idea. So if you haven't taken the OAT and you've got a D or a C that you're worried about, we're going to probably wait on that OAT to advise you whether or not you should move forward with that course. Okay, back to our lovely pandemic we're all suffering with. The impact on coursework. You know, the biggest thing is the change in the structure. Many of you had never had online classes, and now you can say you have. There are people who will argue that online classes are always worse than in-person classes, but I do not agree with that. I do think the camaraderie of having an in-person class can be important, but I don't think that necessarily an online course is not as structurally sound as a in-class, in-person lecture. But we do understand the pass-fail, the lack of on-campus resources could be an issue. Am I saying we're going to start looking at 2.0s for admission? No, I am not. But we do understand that there could be differences that we as an admissions office have to be ready for, have to maybe make adjustments. When we say we accept pass-fail, we do, but we are also going to ask you, did you have the option for a letter grade? And if you had the option for a letter grade, we are definitely going to recommend that. I know that may sound like we're being tough. Well, maybe we are, but it is very difficult from an admissions office perspective to differentiate between candidates if everybody passed every course that they took and there were no grading principles in effect. So we do want you to take the letter grade when you can. When you get to SCO, everything will be letter grade except for clinical courses. You will get pass, fail, or honors pass in those. But those are different. You don't take tests with clinical courses. You have to operate and work on people. So pass, fail are only really I guess I can say a good sign of competence when they're in a clinical setting and not in the classroom. Again, we will accept it, but we do encourage you to try to take letter grades. For the OAT, you see.
Can we ask one question here?
Sure.
All right, so this is more about GPA and transcripts. I took a course twice. Will you consider the highest grade or the average of those two grades when calculating the cumulative GPA?
Well, that's a very good question. And I, in the past, would have had one answer, and I may have to have a different answer now. And the reason I'm saying all that is, in the past, OptomCAS had a rule that said if you took a course and then repeated it, and you took the same exact course at the same exact school with the same exact course department name and number, they would eliminate the older grade and count only the higher grade or the newer grade. That is no longer the case with OptomCAS. So it basically becomes a situation of, yes, in many cases, it's an average of the two. The bottom line on that really is that we're going to see a D or an F, even if you repeat it. Most schools will not, unless you've gone through what's called academic bankruptcy, they will not delete courses from your transcript. So you may be thinking, oh, I failed organic, but I repeated it and made a B+. They're only going to see the B+. No, in most cases, we're going to see both grades. It may not go into your GPA, but if we see lots of repeats, red flags will definitely go up, because when you get to optometry school or any health profession school, there's very few repeating of courses. And a student at SCO who fails a course must appear before a committee of faculty to determine if he or she is allowed to remain in school. And if they are not allowed to remain, they're obviously dismissed. They may be able to come back in the next year and they're going to repeat that course. Some students are allowed to repeat the course in the next ensuing semester. But in undergrad, we're going to see those grades. So just keep that in mind, that it really probably is going to be an average of the two grades, but if we see too many repeats, it's going to be a concern for us. Okay, OAT, competitive range 320 and above. Recommendations between 300 and 310. That's usually when we have to decide whether to ask you to retake it or not. And if it's below 300, there's no question whatsoever. We're going to ask you to retake. We do not mean you must have a score of 300 above in every single subsection. But if your total science score drops below 300, again, red flags come up. And I have seen academic averages of 320 and total science scores of 280 or 290. That's definitely going to be a cause for concern. Could the person be admitted? Yes, they could. Could they be declined? Yes, they could. You really just want to put forth your best effort. I have many candidates over the years who've said, oh, I just took it the first time to see what it was like, to practice. Well, you know, if you want to practice with $500 or however much it costs now, send me the $500 and let me tell you what I would tell you to do. You do not need to practice with that test. You need to go into that test saying, this is it. I'm going to pass. I'm going to do well on this test, and I'm going to put forth the effort. And for some candidates, that means tons of studying. And for some candidates who have a great GPA, they think sometimes they can get away with little studying and then it smacks them. Don't go into that test without being prepared. There's Kaplan study guides available. There are Kaplan courses to take. There, probably the biggest recommendation I get now is for Chad's videos, which are available online. You can take just the organic one, or you can take organic and general chemistry and biology. You get choices. You just want to go into that test well rested and well prepared, and then you don't have to take it again. Sometimes life happens, and no matter what, you get sick the night before, or your grandmother or grandfather passes away the week before, and you're just not in the right frame of mind. Then that becomes a decision of, if it's early in the year, then you may want to cancel it and take it later. If it's getting into November, December, or after, you really don't have much of a chance to cancel it. So go into the test ready. Know that it's going to be tough. Know that it's going to take, I believe it takes you 4 hours now. And remember that the OAT is like the GPA. Threes are our friends, and you want to see threes on your sections. Do not be offended when I ask you to retake it. I am not doing that because I think you are dumb. I think some students get offended that I ask them to retake and they develop a little attitude. That's fine. I'm just telling you that I've seen it for 20 years, and I know that if you score 300 and you're a 3.2, you may be sitting there waiting on an invitation for quite a while. We also highly value those who do listen to our advice and retake. And those are the ones that, let's say you had a 300 or a 310 and you, excuse me, you retook it and you scored the same. Well, you know, that's not a guarantee you're going to get in, but we are certainly going to value your effort more than the candidate who did not retake it. So again, be prepared up front and try your best to not have to take that test twice. Again, money is important, but everything else. Okay, let's move on. For the testing about with the pandemic, as you know, reduced capacity. You have longer now to get signed up, but it is going to take more. You may end up having to travel. Let's say the class in Jackson, Mississippi, is the testing center is closed there, but there's one in Little Rock. Well, you may have to drive to Little Rock. You're going to have to be a little more flexible probably than you were in the past. Again, knowing that there's a 50% capacity, keep that in mind when you are trying to book your test. Okay.
We have a few questions actually, Mr. Robertson, regarding the OAT. So the first one is, can a high OAT score make up for a lower GPA from a harder undergraduate university?
Well, I'm not going to embarrass anybody and tell them to tell me what that harder university is. But yes, an OAT score that's, 350 and you're a 2.8 and you went to a 4-year school, all 4 years, and that school is in some standards considered to be a very good school. Yes, you might have, we might not think twice about it. But sometimes people think because they went to generic state university that it's harder than the next state's generic state university, and we don't find that. We quite frankly put schools like Ivy League schools, University of Chicago, Stanford, etc., into a category of, oh wow, that's a really good school, and that gets a little more flexibility. But we know, again, that there are schools that are tougher, and if you've done relatively well, lots of A's and B's with smatterings of C's, but you've performed really well on the OAT, then yes, we're going to consider that. We're also, though, going to look at how did you do in your senior year.
Okay, do you have to score 300 and above on total science and academic average only, or in each individual section of the OAT?
Well, the only one that we really say you have to is the academic average. We've admitted candidates without a 300 in total science, and we certainly admitted students without a 300 in all of the subsections. But it has been more than 20, 25 years, maybe longer, since we have admitted a candidate with an academic average below 300. So just know that a 300 is not anything magical. I can't remember how many files we rejected this year, but I can promise you there were 300s, 310s, 320s, etc. in that group. But especially in the physics section is the lowest score nationally. And you may say, oh, well, I did really well in physics. I made an A in both classes. Well, I've seen lots of A's in both classes and seen 240, 250, and 260 for a physics score. So know ahead of time, it's going to be probably the most difficult section. Also know ahead of time we have a little more flexibility in that section. So sometimes we might see all sections at 320 and above and a physics score of 270. And we end up accepting that candidate. We see they did well in the classroom and we move on. So to answer the question directly, it doesn't necessarily have to be a 300 for total science or each of the subsections, but it certainly helps.
Okay. And would taking the OAT a second time lower the chances of being accepted as opposed to taking it only once?
Not really. Again, you heard me say like 25% of our students took it a second time. So it's not like we don't admit people. It's when you get to 3 times and more that it's just very difficult to be admitted. I mean, at 3 times, we're starting to wonder, did you memorize part of the test? Or you have to get special permission for a 4th attempt, and we basically will no longer give that permission. You'll have to get another school to do that, because we just, I mean, in the last 12 years, I can think of 1 or 2 candidates who took it more than 3 times. And one of them, she went up every single time. So we were seeing progress. So it's not like we look at a second attempt and go, oh, wow, they had to take it 2 times. No, not at all. But when you get to that 3rd time, it can become an issue.
Okay, and so the last question I'll ask for right now is, if an applicant has over a 3.5 GPA and has a lot of experience in shadowing as well as extracurricular activities, is there an approximate OAT score that they should aim for?
Well, we tell everybody to aim for at least 320. You know, if you're a 3.5 and a 300, you might get admitted. I might tell you to take it again. There's just lots of factors that we're going to look at. But a 3.5 with a 320 and above, I'm probably going to be satisfied in bringing you in for an interview, especially if you've got good experience in the field and your grades are consistent and you've got some service, etc. That's going to play a big part. But we just don't want candidates to think that there is a magic number, because besides scoring above 300, there really isn't.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move ahead and talk about a little bit about experience in the field, which again is one of those things that we know it's going to be difficult if you don't have X number of hours at this point. So let's just play for a minute that there is no such thing as COVID-19 and everything is hunky-dory where we all are. We're going to recommend 30 to 45 hours of shadowing. So, and if you have 3 modes of practice, that does not mean you have to have 15, 15, and 15. You might get 30 in one office, 7 in another, and 8 in the third. The reason we do that is so many candidates are swayed by the one practice that they've visited or worked for that they think everybody's office is like that. So I'm not exaggerating in the least when I say I have gotten candidates with 700, 800, 900 hours of work in one office, and it might be a great private practice. And when I write them, when they apply, I immediately say, you need to get in another practice. We may go ahead and invite that person for an interview, but we do not want any candidate coming to optometry school thinking that the field of optometry is exactly what occurred in the office, the one office in which they shadowed or worked. Many candidates don't even realize that an optometrist can perform laser surgeries in some states, that an optometrist can prescribe Schedule II drugs, that an optometrist can treat all manner of diseases because they worked in a commercial chain and fitted people for glasses, and they never dealt with anybody who was treating diseases. So you need to see different modes so that you learn what's out there for you, because I've literally had students think they were going to do option A. They went to a second practice that we recommended and they changed their mind based on that experience. So if you've never been, for example, to an office that practices vision therapy, I highly recommend that, simply because a lot of offices don't practice vision therapy. So you would want to ask your optometrist or do some research and say, where can I find an optometrist who performs vision therapy? Vision therapy is sometimes known as behavioral optometry. It deals with traumatic brain injuries, learning disabilities, etc. So If you don't have any experience there, try to get in some experience there. If you've done all commercial, without a doubt, you need to get in private practices. If you've done all private, you need to see a commercial. If you've never been to a practice where optometrists and ophthalmologists work side by side, you need to see that, because what they do is going to be different than at a general practice. So you can never have too much diversity or too much shadowing. It's important understanding where optometry fits within the healthcare field. For example, Obamacare was a huge blessing for optometrists. It expanded their scope, it expanded their ability to charge insurance companies, etc. And you also need to understand that you may work in one state, and I'll give you a good example. We're here in the corner of Mississippi, Arkansas, and Tennessee. And right now, if you drive about 2 miles from campus over the bridge into Arkansas, you can perform laser procedures as an optometrist. Whereas in Tennessee, that has not passed yet. In Mississippi, they're working on it. Louisiana already has it. Kentucky already has it. Oklahoma has it. So you want to be able to see what optometrists are doing in your state, as well as any other state that you think you might work in. When we say commitment to the field, that's part of what I was talking about earlier. Doing your exploration. We love it when you shadow in multiple settings, and you tell us about it, that you shadowed an MD, a DO, a dentist, a pharmacist. That tells us you wanted to see what all was out there and what was best for you. So we want to see after that you found out optometry was the field for you. We want you to balance your life in the classroom and outside with shadowing. You know, a lot of times candidates will tell me, I just didn't have time, Mr. Robertson. I have 15 hours a week and I'm in my fraternity. And, you know, I have to point to that candidate and say, well, I've got 62 files right here who had the same obligations that you did, and they found time to do it. We all have 24 hours in a day. And as long as there are candidates who are filling those 24 hours in a day and making headway on them becoming a healthcare professional, you've got to compete with that person. And where that becomes very important is if you're in a state that helps provide funding, but they only provide a limited number of seats. Arkansas being a great example. 5 students a year from Arkansas can get some money, a lot of money, from the state of Arkansas. Some years we enroll 15 people from the state of Arkansas. That means 10 of them don't get 1 penny from the state. But the 5 who applied early, had strong files, were committed to service, and had shadowed a lot, they got, right now it's about $19,000 a year. So it's very important that you experience as much as possible about the field of optometry. Okay, we're going to move ahead then. Like we said before, you know a lot of sites are going to be closed for shadowing. Another thing, if you're, within hours of Memphis, we don't allow you to shadow on campus. We will allow you to shadow at one of our off-site facilities possibly, but on campus we do not. And one of the main reasons we do that is, A, we want you to get out and find people on your own. B, shadowing in the eye center, you can learn a lot about the profession, but not from the way that you're going to experience it. We're basically a hospital almost, a hospital for eyes anyway. And shadowing here is not going to show you how private practices run. So that's why we don't allow shadowing here. But go to the AOA, go to the AOSA, contact professionals in the field, ask them questions. That can end up being very important down the line.
Mr. Robertson, If
Yes.
applicants have conducted several phone interviews with optometrists in lieu of the shadowing that they can't currently do, can they count those hours on the application?
I would want you to list it specifically as interviewing. You can count it as optometric experience, but I would want you to say interview and then briefly tell me, who you interviewed. If things continue the way they are, that may be enough. At this moment, I'm going to say that's not enough. You would definitely want to get into some offices, and we do think that they will be opening. Again, let's play devil's advocate and say that you can't get in those offices till later in the fall. Then maybe we'll change our perspective and allow those to count as shadowing. But for now, I say list them as interviews and continue to seek out other opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's talk about advice. Look, there it is again. Apply early, apply early. That means generally July, August, September, even into October. It's when you get past that things can get iffy. You want to shadow, like we said, prepare for the test. Don't make this, practice test. You want to begin that OptomCAS application, finish it, and then either have a Skype interview or an in-person interview, and try to, if everything rolls together, you can actually be offered a seat by the time your senior year starts. And that's a great situation to get that pressure off of you. So just again, if you're listening to this, you're probably going to apply early anyway. It's the people that aren't listening to this. So I need you to do me a favor and tell those people to get with it, or they're going to fall behind. Okay, this is big. And Ashley can tell you, Miss Cates can tell you for sure that this is big at SCO. We're going to look at everything you do. When we say use appropriate etiquette in all forms of communication, I just told my entering class, they're free to call me Mike, but until that point, I really don't feel that it's appropriate. If you've never met me, I think it's probably important that you call me Mr. Robertson for now. I'm not trying to be a snob. I'm just trying to tell you that's just the way the professional world works. Don't send an email as, hey, you, or hey, Mike, what's going on? I need some information, buddy. I'm not your buddy now. I'm trying to get you in school. So be prepared to talk professionally. Now, I'm probably one of the most folksy, laid-back people you'll ever meet. And I will give you clues as to when we can start becoming folksy. But if you start off being very relaxed, it's kind of hard to go in the other direction. The same thing goes for when you are interviewed. Now, I'm telling everybody here that every person we use to interview, except for maybe one, and that person is only used occasionally, everybody at SCO who performs your interview is a doctor of some type. And when the interview's over, it's really not a good idea to refer to them as their first name. They may have introduced themselves to you as John Doe. And you finish the interview and say, well, John, that was really nice. That's really not appropriate. They are doctors until they tell you to call them otherwise, the same way you will be. Another thing that's probably one of my pet peeves is allowing time to respond to questions. I can't tell you how many times, and let me tell you, I pride myself on my response time. I am pretty quick in getting back to you, but I have literally had candidates email me a question, and within 3 minutes of that email coming in, my phone rings and they're asking me the same question. No, that's not appropriate. I need one or the other. So don't send an email and then turn around and ask for a response. Don't send an email and 30 minutes later act like you should have had a response. I'm going to get you a lot of responses within 30 minutes or an hour. But my belief is you need at least 24 hours to allow someone to get back to you. So don't get pushy in that process. When we say maintain contact, I can't emphasize enough. When I get 812 applications, some people are going to fall through the cracks. That's inevitable. Even though my goal personally is to get everyone admitted, somebody's going to fall through or people are going to fall through. That's when you contact me and you say, would you mind looking at my file again? Or could you give me some advice on what I need to do? Or should I expect an inquiry? Because I'm human. I may have skipped over you. And especially if you're in that blob that I referred to earlier, you're a 3.0, 3.1 with a 300 or a 310. There's a lot of you in that category. So don't cut off communication with us. Stay in contact. Look for answers online. I mean, I don't mind answering questions, but when you call and ask me what courses are required, I'm going to point you to a website. When you call and ask me what tests do you have to take, I'm going to refer you to the website. You need to be a little educated. This is a very high demand society. I understand that, but you need to be searching on your own, and then you can make an educated question out of it. So it's always important that you treat people as professionals. And along those lines, if you come for an interview, or even if we Skype an interview, dress professionally. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not necessarily saying a man has to have on a coat and tie, but it certainly doesn't hurt anything. And for ladies, I'm gonna lay it on the line here too. I don't consider leggings to be appropriate for an interview. I don't consider sweatshirts appropriate for an interview. I don't consider, quite frankly, probably no socks or hose or something to be professional. You don't want to look like you just left the gym. And occasionally we get that, and it's just a bad point for you is what it is. Okay. We're kind of starting to wind up. I want you to see there lots of information on when the Prometric is closed, when it's open, where you can find out more information about the coronavirus, all those types of things. And then if you've got questions for us, we are always available via email, either through admissions@sco.edu. There's a virtual fair coming up in June, which is a fantastic way to learn about many schools, because I believe all 23 schools and colleges will be represented there. So you can ask questions, the same question to multiple schools, see what answers you get. It's very important that I always tell candidates to apply to at least 2 schools. The average is 5, which is too much to me, but you have to remember, if things revert to more normal and everybody goes back or continues, I guess I should say, on campus interviews, you've got to travel to those interviews, and it gets kind of expensive. So pay attention to the data for schools. For example, if you apply to a public school that only takes, let's say, 50 people, and they have to enroll 30 from in-state, and you're not from that state, you just narrowed yourself down to 1 of 20 people to be selected for an at-large seat. So there's sometimes hidden information that you don't think about. The other thing is, let's just say you live in North Carolina and you say, oh, I really would like to go to school in California. I just say keep repeating that, because that is across the country, and you're going to have to fly to get there. It's just things like that. You have to decide what's more comfortable for you. So look at those things when you're making a decision.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Robertson. We actually have quite a few inquiries that have come in the question box. And they're good questions, so thank you all for actually composing them and submitting them. So the first question is it still important to take 16 plus hours a semester if you are working and in extracurriculars at the same time?
Not necessarily. Good question. In fact, I should have clarified that. If you're working, we don't expect tons of volunteerism. That kind of substitutes for it. I have had candidates who worked 40 hours a week and took 15 hours a week in class. I wasn't expecting them to do tons of volunteer work. So yes, work, and again, I don't necessarily mean work for an optometrist, but that can be a nice change. So if you're working more than 20 hours a week, then I would say 16, 17, 18 hours is not always required. If it's only 15 hours a week, then or only 20 hours a week of work, then I think you're capable of handling 15 hours of schooling. When you get here, the first semester is 23 semester hours. We don't expect you to take 23 in undergrad, but we expect you to take as many as possible.
Okay. Is it okay if someone's already taken the OET or taking it within the next month, if possible, that they submit their scores, even though they can't have the transcripts sent now? Can they have OET scores submitted?
Yes, your OET scores should go import directly to OptomCAS. But what I tell candidates is when they take the test after the application cycle starts, you feel free to email me the unofficial score you get. When you leave the testing center, you will be handed a score report, and you can take a photo of that and email it to me or scan it, whatever. Because we will invite you for an interview based on unofficial scores. We just can't offer a seat until we have the official scores. But when you sign up for the test, you should be indicating which schools receive it, and they will be imported, but it usually takes about a week or two to get to OptomCAS.
Okay, in regards to shadowing, once an applicant has submitted their application, both in OptomCAS and for the SEO supplemental, can the applicants go back and add shadowing experience that they may have accrued?
Yes, you can go back to your OptomCAS application often and add to it. But what I suggest is a two-pronged approach. Add it to OptomCAS, therefore all schools that you apply to have access to it. But send me an email and tell me. When you add something to a file, I'm not going to see it necessarily for a long time. But if you email me and say, just wanted to update you on my shadowing. I did 10 more hours at Office X and was able to sit in with patients who had the following conditions, et cetera, et cetera. I'd like for you to email that to me or to admissions as well as putting it in OptomCAS.
Are internships required or just simply recommended? And if so, which types of internships does the committee look for?
Oh, they're totally recommended. Really, the only internships that I see are schools who have them and require an internship for a degree. So we don't require any type of internship. It's, I mean, sometimes internship can just be another word for shadowing. So if you get one, and it can be in an optometry office, then we would say A, it'd be a private practice. And B, it's really good if it can have multiple docs. And to me, it's really good if some of those docs are ophthalmologists. That just gives you more diversity, I would say. But nothing is required as far as an internship.
And what information goes into the supplemental application?
I hate to sound sassy, but nothing. It's really not a lot. It shouldn't take you more than 10 or 15 minutes. It's basically demographic information that we just cannot get from OptomCAS in a timely manner. So getting that supplemental allows us to correspond to you quickly. You tell us your GPA, when you're taking the OAT, or when you had it, your undergraduate institution, your mailing address, etc. It really should not take more than 10 or 15 minutes to fill out.
If someone has a very strong GPA but took a year at a local community college, does having community college courses look worse than just going to a four-year school?
No, not necessarily. It's really, you know, what I tell candidates is the more you take at a community college, the harder we're going to look at your OAT. So you may not, it may not all work perfectly. Just try to keep that in mind, I guess is the best thing to say.
Okay. And can individual schools see the other schools that they've applied to in OptomCAS?
Oh, that's a very good question. Pay attention to what you sign because you're going to sign something saying that I and all schools will be able to see that, but not until, I believe the date is March 1. So all throughout the year, no, we cannot see where you've applied. Once March 1 rolls around, there's a shared decisions report that we can access, and that will tell me if you've been offered a seat, not necessarily applied, but offered a seat in another school. And we do that because the school year is ending and we need to make decisions. And so if you have a deposit at 3 schools at one time, chances are all 3 schools are going to write you and say you need to make a final decision. Technically, you'll have until May 15th, and after May 15th, the school can pull your offer if you remain deposited at more than one school. But again, all the way up into March, we cannot see where you applied.
Is class rank taken into account in the admissions process?
Not really. I don't know that many undergrads have class rank. So, I mean, if you have it and you provide it, and it's good, I'm not going to say it's not going to be helpful. It's just very few schools, undergraduate schools, have a class rank, so we don't see it very often.
Okay, in regard to the letters of reference, what should someone do if they haven't formed a close enough relationship with an optometrist to request the letter of recommendation because of COVID? They may have an optometrist that they've shadowed for a little while, but they don't know that that the person can accurately attest to the applicant's character.
Well, that would be the situation that I referred to earlier, contacting that optometrist and saying, could I have an interview because I'd like to use you as a reference? And, you know, most cases like that, the professional is going to say, sure. And then they're going to ask you questions that make them comfortable in determining if they can write a letter for you. So we're not going to waive an OD letter ever, and we're not going to accept an ophthalmologist letter. A pet peeve for mine is people who want to send an ophthalmologist letter, and my response basically is, are you going to medical school or are you going to optometry school? Those people follow a different route. And we want you to work with somebody who's going to have the same route that you have.
Okay. And if the authors of those letters of recommendation are only capable of writing recommendation letters by January, can an applicant still be considered for an interview even if the application is turned in early in the cycle?
Yeah, I hate to say it depends, but it does. Most of the time, I'll be honest, I'm not that picky personally on seeing the letter of reference to invite, but most of the time people already have them, so it's not a question. So let's say that I've got an application and they're great, 3.6, 360. I'm probably comfortable inviting them without an academic or optometric recommendation, but let's say I see a 3.1, 310, I'm going to want an academic reference for that person before I will interview. And the same occurs for, let's say someone has only shadowed 25 hours. I may say I need an OD letter before I will offer you an interview. So that's very rare does that happen. but occasionally, yes, I will wait for a letter before I invite for an interview.
Okay. And in regard to these letters for undergraduate or from undergraduate professors, is there an area of study that the committee is looking for in particular?
Can you repeat that again?
Yes. Regarding the letters of recommendation that come from the undergraduate professors, is there an area of study that the committee is looking for in particular?
Well, we require the letter to be a pre-health professions advisor or a physics, chemistry, or biology professor that has taught you. So we don't want a psychology professor. Occasionally I've taken psychology if the person was a psych major and they took some neurobiology courses or, you know, something like that. But most of the time it needs to be that health professions advisor or a physics, chemistry, or biology professor.
And are committee letters recommended or accepted?
Yes, we love committee letters. They go through OptomCAS. If your committee included an optometrist letter and that optometrist was indeed somebody with whom you worked or shadowed, then you've taken care of your letters right then and there. So we will accept an OD letter embedded into a committee's letter. As far as submission of the committee letter, there will be instructions when you fill out your application and you list who's to get that email. There will be instructions to them saying, here's how the letter should be submitted.
Okay, switching gears a little bit, are scholarships awarded to students after the first year who may not have received one as an incoming student?
As a matter of fact, we have a, I think it's called Achievement Scholarship we award, and generally one or two candidates, probably two, that finished the first year, performed well, but did not get a scholarship on the front end. They can be considered for, I believe it's $5,000 a year scholarship. So yes, there's only a few, keeping in mind that we award about 60 to 70 on the front end.
Okay. And then there's a couple of questions related to biochemistry. Is principles of biochem acceptable, or does the credit have to be in biochem 1?
Again, at the risk of sounding sarcastic, I don't know principles versus biochem 1. At one school they call it this, at another school they call it that. If I see either one of those courses, principles of biochem or biochem 1, I'm not going to question it. The only time it becomes an issue is the substitution of molecular and cell biology. And we've had some confusion. We're trying to be straightforward now and say that it can't just be titled molecular biology. It has to usually be molecular / cell biology because the content varies when you add, I believe it's the cell, when you add that into it. So just a straightforward molecular biology is probably not going to satisfy our biochem requirement. Whereas, well, let me clarify that. Molecular will, but just cell will not. So if you took a class called molecular, we may have to look at it and see, but most of the time we're looking for a class indicated to be molecular / cell biology, not just cell biology.
Okay, you actually answered the next question regarding biochem. Does SCO provide aid for a certain number of Kansas residents?
We do. Well, actually, we don't provide it. The state of Kansas does. And what Kansas does is they have awarded it up to 4 students with money in the past, 4 students per class. Some years it's only 1, some years it's 2, some years it's 3. Kansas is a return to state, to practice state. And that just means that if you accept the money from the state of Kansas, which right now is $6,200 per year. You agree to go back to practice 1 year for every year that you accepted those funds, or you have to repay it. So we are in talks with the state of Kansas trying to get that amount increased to $10,000 per year, but we have not been given a final answer on that. So for now, we stick with saying 3 to 4 generally per year from Kansas can get $6,200 per year from the state. But for some candidates who are really top notch, they're not as interested because they might qualify for, say, a $15,000 scholarship from SCO.
Okay. And someone would just like clarification on the essay part of the application in OptomCAS. There's no prompt style of essay. It's just simply the personal statement, correct?
Correct. It's called personal statement essay. Everybody calls it something different, but there'll be a few questions to guide you in that, but it is pretty straightforward. My one piece of advice is do not regurgitate every single thing you listed elsewhere in the application. The second thing is tell me something interesting about yourself, maybe something, a story, a vignette of how you got interested. I told people this year, one of the best essays I got started off talking about a bowl of Lucky Charms cereal. And it was a fantastic essay. Essays most of the time will not exclude you from being offered an interview and will not make you, if you've got low numbers, allow you to be interviewed. It is a supplemental piece. I have denied an interview before because of it, but that's strictly because it was full of errors, grammatical mistakes, etc. So it's a personal statement with a limit, and pay attention to the limit on the words. I do not want to read a novel. So when you run out of characters or words, you have to go back and edit because it's not really appropriate to say, okay, I'm going to email them the rest of my essay.
Okay. How many candidates approximately do you accept from New York?
Really, limitless is the correct answer because we have no limit. We can accept candidates from all 50 states and every country in the world. The one thing a New York student has to remember is if you come to SCO, when it comes time for your 4th year externships, the state of New York is very stingy and they will not allow a New York student to complete an externship in the state of New York unless they go to SUNY College of Optometry. So in other words, you come here, you go 3 years, and then you're going to go on externships. Do not expect to be allowed to return to New York. Now, we have a site in Connecticut, and we have in New Hampshire, and various states around, Pennsylvania, etc. But you cannot complete an externship there, but we can accept as many as we want.
Okay, and the last question we have is, how long on average does the application process with OptomCAS take?
Well, that's kind of a nebulous question. I'm not sure if you're asking how long does it take to complete it. OptomCAS may be able to tell you an average number of since the day a file was started to the day it was completed. I'm not aware of that. And I think a lot of the answer depends on how quickly you are going to get documents submitted. I mean, I know there are candidates who within a week or two have completed the entire file and everything is on file. Then there's others who 6 months later, they still haven't finished it. So it's kind of hard to give you an answer on that. It's all incumbent upon you making sure you request the transcripts as soon as you apply so that they're on file.
Okay, we got an additional question come in. Is there anything particular a North Carolina applicant should know while applying to SCO?
One thing you should know about North Carolina is the state has a similar program like Kansas, but they give a lot more money. I think the number now is around $15,000 per year if you agree to go back to North Carolina to practice. The key is the deadline for applying is like April 1, April being at the April 1 prior to starting school in August. And many candidates do not have their degree by April 1. And for some reason, the entity that disperses this money wants to see a degree by April 1. So the chances of you getting that money from the state in your first year are very low if you don't have a degree by that previous April. However, you can apply the next year, which would be your second year here, and start receiving funds if you are approved. It's not limitless, but many of our North Carolina students do get that $15,000 per year.
Okay, well, this brings us to the end of our presentation. Mr. Robertson has covered quite a bit of information today, and I hope that you have found it to be helpful as you begin the admissions process this year. Through the session, we may have addressed some of the inquiries or concerns that you had regarding the admissions process, but if you do have some more, I want to reiterate what Mr. Robertson said. Please feel free to email us at admissions@sco.edu if you have any further questions. I would also like to take a moment to plug our next session, as Mr. Robertson did. On June 2nd, which is next Tuesday, we will be participating in the ASCO Virtual Fair. And ASCO stands for Association of Schools and Colleges of Optometry. And as Mr. Robertson mentioned, it's a partnership with all 23 schools to help disseminate information to prospective students regarding your various options and the admissions criteria. So representatives from all of the optometry schools come together to answer your questions in a virtual platform. And each school will have its own chat room that you can enter and see the transcript of all the communication. So you can learn a lot from this shared event. So we hope to see you there next week. You can see the link to the webpage where you can register for the webinar, as well as any of our previous webinars that you'd like to view as well at that link right there with information sessions. Once this one has downloaded, the communications department will have this one available for showing too. And also, if you haven't done so already, we invite you to request more information. By signing up at the explore.sco.edu inquiry form link, you will be able to receive continual communication from SCO to further explore our unique program. You will have a personalized microsite created for you, as well as a personal advisor assigned to you. So I'd like to thank Mr. Robertson. I appreciate your sharing your time and expertise today, and for being so available and helpful to students all the time. And thank you to all the attendees for connecting with us today. We hope that you will join us again. And please remember to contact us should you have any questions. In the meantime, stay well and have a great day.